So, welcome everybody. In today's webinar, we are going to discuss how to read the job post. And I know that most of the students and science graduates will actually put the phrase scientist in their search. Therefore, today we are going to analyze one of the job posts I found on LinkedIn when I Googled scientist. And this post will be discussed with absolute experts in the field, Jane Moors from Outer Box Thinking, as well as Celeste Sirin from Employer Branding South Africa. So thank you, ladies, for agreeing for this webinar and discussion.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting us, Martina.
Thanks very much. Looking forward to this.
So let's jump right into. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I just Googled scientist on LinkedIn, and here is the post. We see initially that we have a senior scientist, responsible for reagent and assay development in certain company. For sake of the webinar, we are not mentioning the company itself. And that's the first thing that we see. So what do we see here, Jane?
Well, I think what we've got here is we've got the job title and we've got a little bit of a description. So if we're thinking about applying for this job, we know that the CV is our entry point into the recruitment process. So our CV isn't getting us the job, but the CV is getting us the interview, which might get us the job. So very important to already start taking note of what is being shared there so that we can match our CVs to what is being shared, because we want people who are reading the CV to be able to make a connection between what they want and what you have as an applicant. I love the way Celeste often describes it. She says a CV is almost like a question and answer paper. It's like the employers have the questions and your CV needs to have the answers. So that's why it's really important that when you're putting your CV together, you really almost use the jargon that they would have used in their advertisement, because it needs to resonate with whoever's reading it. And typically you only have 5 to 7 seconds to capture somebody's attention, because they're going through so many CVs that yours needs to stand out.
Wow, 5 to 7 seconds, that's really, really short time, to be honest.
Not long.
Okay, so...
Yes, does that answer your question, Celeste? I mean, Martina, is that what you were looking for?
No, definitely. So, Celeste, can you tell us how we should look at the description itself?
Yes. So thanks for that, and completely agree with you, Jane. I think a lot of people get put off by the title of a job ad, and I always say, please don't just take the title of the job ad at face value. It's imperative that you actually look deeper. Don't look at that title and just disqualify yourself, because often what happens is companies use their own internal jargon in terms of the job titles and what they're looking for. It's imperative that you go into the actual body and the content of the job ad to understand whether it does in fact match up with the criteria that you can deliver on. If you're ever uncertain as to the title that they've used, please just Google it. You've got so much information at your fingertips, and just find out whether what you call a senior scientist matches up to what they call as a senior scientist, because everyone's definition is completely different. So I believe that, that is going to give you the crux of the core focus of what they're looking for. The description is very superficial, and often you don't get right at the top what they are looking for. So again, I urge you to actually dig deep and go into the content of what they're in fact looking for in their applicant.
What I also found sorry, yeah.
No, I think what Celeste is saying is such a good point. because sometimes we do get put off by the job title. But again, they need to see that what you have to offer matches with what they're putting out there. And I think another reason why when you apply, even if you have done something similar, but you would describe it differently, that you rather adopt their jargon in your CV, not just for it to resonate with them when they read it, but also because of their search engine optimization and applicant tracking systems, for them to actually pick up your CV in the first place when they're searching.
So basically, your CV goes to some kind of search engine and it's not the person's desk at first. So AI is deciding if in the first place you're going to be rejected.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends how advanced your employer is in terms of their recruitment process and how automated it is. So it could be automation, it could be AI, but either way, there is that sense of you've got to be able to have, I mean, they might just be using a manual word search on the document. It depends. But either way, there's definitely that initial screening before somebody gets to read it, whether it's a machine or a person.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. And also what I found interesting is that you already get from LinkedIn, for instance, information how many applicants are there per one position, which is seen here that there are 68, for instance, applicants for this position in particular. So you know that there is quite a lot of competition for that position.
That's 100%. And as Jane said, you know, you need to adopt the same language, the same jargon, whether it is looked upon by a recruiter with their naked eye or whether it is filtered through an applicant tracking system. You need to adopt that jargon, otherwise you're not going to get through their system. So, yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to what was else in the same advertisement. It's not changed. And what I found here very interesting, it was a massive list of skills that they were requiring from the candidate. But I could definitely see a distinction. On the left side of the screen, we have the technical skills, which we as scientists know. We are familiar with designing and planning of our experiments and finding definitions and recommendations, because we do it on a day-to-day basis, basically analyzing the results, interpreting it. That's what we are trained to do, no matter on which level you are, because if you are just on the bachelor level, you are just learning the techniques, but you already know them in a way. And obviously, if you go further in your education and as a PhD, you are like a manager of your own program, of your own experiments and projects. So we have those skills. But what was interesting was the other side. So the other side was kind of touching upon different skills. And I would love to discuss those skills with you, because I think that this is something that puts us off when we see it, because it's kind of cross-functional relationship. What is this? It's basically something that we seem not to be able to relate to. So let's maybe move on to those skills themselves, as the soft power skills.
I love what you've said there, Martina, with you've kind of had soft and then you've crossed it out and you've put power skills, because I think typically people did used to talk about soft skills and hard skills, and soft skills were kind of for the people who maybe weren't as academic or weren't as technical. But what we've seen now, especially with COVID and people talking about the future of work and the new world of work, even before COVID, the most critical skills that were deemed to be important for success in the new world of work and the future of work were actually on the softer side, those power skills that you're talking about. So even at the beginning of this year, when they did an international survey with C-suite executives and asked them, what do you see as the most important skills for the future? They mentioned technology, but they also mentioned the ability to build relationships, and to reimagine networks. And a lot of those are your soft power skills, as you put them there. So people will probe for those things in an interview. They might look for them in a CV. Now, again, remember, your CV isn't what's getting you the job, but your CV is what's getting you the interview. So you need to be able to put evidence of what they're looking for in your CV so that they can think, if we interview this person, it's likely they're going to be able to share examples of these requirements. So, for example, if they've listed something like being able to plan or communicate or have supervisory responsibility, or work with project teams or relationships. So there's a couple of those that are mentioned in this particular job description. So what you want to do in your CV is make sure that, again, you're using that same jargon, but you're relating it to projects that you've done in your studies or outside of your studies within teams. But you're really sharing specific examples of where you've shown those skills. And any achievements that you have in that. Perhaps you worked as part of a team that won an award for something or got really good feedback on something. So you want to be able to mention those things in your CV. Sometimes people get so focused on listing what they've done that they forget to highlight their achievements and the things that really make them stand out from others. Celeste, what do you think?
Completely agree. I think, again, because of the fact that, graduates have limited experience, you have got such a wealth of knowledge or wealth of power skills that you often overlook or underestimate in terms of the resilience and the communications and the team collaboration and the presentation skills and being able to meet strict deadlines and all of those things that you undervalue. And you need to actually highlight that, because I agree with Jane completely. More and more companies are starting to look at the power skills supporting the technical skills. You might be a fantastic data analyst. However, if you cannot present, articulate, or translate what you have actually come out with in terms of your survey, your research, and you cannot articulate and translate it to various line or functional managers and that, you're going to fall short in terms of what the company is looking for. You need a good combination of that. So if you can actually outline that in your CV and motivate how you've managed to do that, a lot can be said then. So you almost need a combination of the technical skills and how you've supported the technical skills with the power skills in order to get your message across, or in order to get to reaching your outcome or your objective.
I love what you're saying, Celeste. Yeah, because I think often people do list the technical skills and then the kind of soft, crossed out power skills separately. Yeah. And I think that's such a great point, to be able to bring them together in an example of something that you've accomplished. So if somebody just reading one example or one line would have the technical and the power skills jumping out at them.
100%. And I think also within the list of power skills, often what companies do or recruiters do is they basically cut and paste the full job description into a job ad, which is a little bit annoying, because then you cannot see the wood from the trees. You don't know how to prioritize, how to distill the most important criteria that you want to actually project and outline in your CV. Mm-hmm. So if I take a look at this ad and we reflect on it, you can see there's words that say may lead assigned projects or team, may have supervisory responsibility. Now, obviously, if you have got that, that's great. But again, what you need to do is prioritize what the main essentials are in terms of establishes as appropriate cross-functional relationships. So that is coming out. Serves as a subject matter expert cross-functionally. So applies concepts of a particular field or specialization to resolve problems of immediate scope and complexity. Those are the ones that are shining through very strongly. The nice to haves are the may lead and the may have. The decisions impact project teams and or broader organization. So with that being said, you need to be able to demonstrate how you used a combination of your technical skills supported by your power skills in order to reach the impact that you made within your project team.
Yeah, great point, Celeste. And I think even on a kind of larger scale, if you step back and look at your CV as a whole, I think, Celeste, what you're saying in terms of prioritizing where you place your information is so critical. And you can do that with your whole CV. For example, if a qualification is really important to that particular employer, then make sure that your education and qualifications are first in your CV. Some people kind of have their CV and they order it in a certain way and that's how it stays. No, change the order around depending on what the potential employer is highlighting as what's important to them. They need to be able to remember you've got that 5 to 7 seconds. So they need to be able to see that critical information, the one that's most important to them first. And then they'll be motivated to read through the rest of your CV.
So if I can just wrap up what you just said, basically certain points can be put together as one point on your CV. And if we would go back for a second to this technical skills that were there before, if we look here and we have designs, plans, executes, experiments or projects together with cross-functional relationships. So basically, if you were a student and you had to perform certain experiment, but it wasn't necessarily only in your field, you had to learn from other groups. You already had to communicate cross-functionally with different teams. You had to design it, you had to plan it, you had to manage the time and collaborate with others. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 100%. That's 100%. So what you've done is you've got your power skills speaking to your technical skills. Irrespective of whether you have the so-called commercial outside of academic experience, you are able to demonstrate that.
And then don't forget what Celeste mentioned just now about the impact. So you've put together your technical and your power skills to describe a particular project that you involved in or you led or supervised, and what was the impact of that project. So if you've got any specific details or any specific numbers or tight deadlines or anything that would be impressive, then bring that into.
So, for instance, a publication or presentation, things like that we could include in the CV.
Yes. Yeah. So almost let's take it back to the competency-based interview technique that Jane, that Jane always trains on in that, where you need a result. What was that favorable result? Because at the end of the day, companies are looking for return on investment. They're looking for measurements. They're looking for key performance indicators. And, it's all very well and all very fine saying you've got the technical capability and the soft or power skills to support it. But as Jane says, what was the end result? What was the outcome? What was the return on investment for the company? And how did you actually impact the end result?
I will ask you a more difficult thing. What if your project didn't result in a publication?
So tell us a little bit more about what you're asking. You're saying that maybe the only Yeah.
Yes, you are supposed to have a return on investment, right? You are, let's say, a master's student and your project didn't end up in publication. Will your thesis be sufficient return on investment or?
I think in answer to that, results might not always be favorable, but what you are doing in order to actioning the improvement on your results in order to in future get to a positive outcome is also what the company is looking for. So how you're going to accelerate, let's not call it a failure, but a disqualification of your publication, of being accepted. What are you doing about it? Are you leaving it there? Or are you actually continuing to upskill yourself, and you will not stop until you actually have a success rate? And that again, it's all about the resilience and the grit that you have in order to not fail and ensure that your publication gets accepted in the future. Is that good enough?
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
What Celeste is saying is the qualities that she's mentioning, you can mention those in a CV, but you're not going to be able to expand in the amount of detail in your CV. So those kinds of questions where they probe a lot deeper are often going to be your interview questions. But I think the main thing is to go back and look at what is important to the particular employer. If publications are important, then you want to highlight the ones that you have and not make a big spotlight in your CV on the instance where you didn't, do a publication. So it's all about where you position things. You put in detail where it would benefit your application. You can just leave out detail where it wouldn't benefit your application. So you're not lying. I never believe in lying. But you just leave things out if there's nothing to be said there that would promote you. Because remember, this is just your ticket to an interview. When you're in the interview, you can position that example with explaining what you learned from the situation and how you built resilience and all of those things. Yeah. And we've also got to bear in mind, I think, as Celeste was explaining the competency-based approach and, the information we're pulling into a CV, as we're listening to this, we can also be thinking, my CV is getting longer and longer and longer. And CVs can only be, really, people want 2 pages, maybe 3. Sometimes they want a 1-pager. So you've got to really select what is the most important information that this employer, potential employer, wants to see. Let me highlight that because that's going to get me my ticket to my interview.
Completely agree, Jane. And I think if publications don't come up, do you really want to mention it? Especially if it was not, the end result was not successful. So without contradicting it, I agree with you. Only mention what is applicable to what they are looking for in the advert.
And I think, we talked a couple of days ago, I think a good point that we mentioned was if you do want to be able to feed onto more detailed information, you can create hyperlinks in your CV, or you can have 2 CVs. Sometimes when I talk to people, I say, have your 1-pager, almost like a flyer, like an advertisement, and then have your more detailed one. Because again, the potential employer might ask you, send us your 2-page CV plus cover letter. And then best you send a cover letter with a 2-page CV, because that's part of their screening process, is seeing how well you listen to the instruction that they've given you about how to put together the CV. Otherwise, you could put together your 1-pager, your more detailed, and send both so that people can choose which one they'd like to read.
Okay, that sounds interesting. And what if you don't have the advertisement? If you just know about the position and you're supposed to send information, what you can refer to? Is there like a place where you can find the values of the company?
Absolutely.
Great point. Celeste, that talks to your strength, I think.
Yeah, completely. And I think I'm glad you hit on that, because it's something that we should have looked at right at the forefront when you said to me, so description and purpose and that kind of thing. In terms of values and that, more and more as well, companies are starting to have a look at the behaviors, the values, the culture match, etc., in an individual, not just the power skills and the technical skills. So without complicating matters further, it's essential that you, as an applicant, look at the values and look at what a company stands for, because it needs to align with what you're looking for in a company. Do they have a strong social responsibility? It might be about environmental or climate, how can I say, initiatives. It could be any of those things. And it might resonate with you more so. And companies are starting to be far more transparent in terms of their kind of social responsibilities and how they want to position themselves as a socially responsible enterprise and that. So if it's something that resonates with your way of thinking, then, make sure that you're looking for that additional information, understanding that we're moving into, a work-life balance as well. So, what is the kind of work ethic? Is there flexibility? Do they encourage you to take time off? Does it align with you? Does it align with what you're looking for, your lifestyle?
Good point. So even, along with what Celeste is saying, if you notice, for example, that this company you're applying to now has on their website, they're saying we now have a hybrid work environment or remote work or, whatever they've done or changed perhaps over COVID, then you can also take that and highlight it in your CV. So maybe there was a particular project that you worked on and you can say, worked remotely, in a team around this project, etc. But you can bring those values or bring those working environments or what's important to them into your CV without them having even listed it in the job description. So that's a great point. It's important to do your research first.
Yes,
yeah, then you're going to say that you did your background research already, so you know them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And background research is so essential. The company can very, very quickly appreciate and see whether you've done your homework beforehand, and it'll come through very strongly in how you compose your CV. Especially if you make reference to certain points within their culture or their value proposition that they aspire towards. So if you can, again, it's about speaking the language of that company.
Yeah, good point, Celeste. And I think sometimes when people think about culture and values, they sometimes think, that can be personal. So just remember that you're still sharing values and culture-related information, but in a work situation, or where you've been studying or whatever the case may be. It doesn't mean you have to share personal information. In fact, our Employment Equity Act says that you shouldn't be having personal information on your CV, because then that lends an opportunity for unfair discrimination and bias. So I was even in a conference the other day, and they talked to what this one recruitment company was saying, that they had got their clients to agree for them to be able to send them CVs without candidates' names on, let alone their photos, just because they really wanted to eliminate any opportunity for bias. But sometimes I see CVs and I see somebody has put on there whether they are married or not, whether they have kids or not, what their health is like, where they live, just what their hobbies are. All of those things you don't have to share, and it's not a good idea to share them up front, Because remember, all you're doing is creating a first impression with someone. So someone once sent me a CV, and the first bits of information they had was some very personal information. And so that's your first impression. That's the bit you retain the most. Rather let them see the information first that talks, as Les was saying, talks the language of their role and of what they're looking for. So you can have your name in there, you can have your contact details, you can have that you're South African if that's your nationality, but beyond that you really don't need much more unless they've asked for evidence of something specific that is relevant to the job.
Okay. Now that's interesting. I always knew that you have to put your hobbies to make yourself more human in your CV. So that's something very interesting.
Well, yeah, because if your potential employer or the recruiter reading your CV doesn't like your hobby or has some kind of judgment against the type of hobbies you do, it's very hard for them to not let their bias kick in and then for them to not listen to that. So
I think it
could be to your advantage or disadvantage. Maybe they love your hobby.
I think it's also important that you've got a limited, how can I say, you've got limited space on your CV or on your document. So you have to be quite mindful about what needs to receive your recruiter's attention. Also understanding that your recruiter is going through lots and lots of CVs. Lots and lots of CVs. So what is going to actually resonate with them at face value immediately? Because they also got a shorter time span as well, because they are inundated with so many CVs. So put yourself in the shoes of a recruiter. You've got 200 CVs of all these graduates. You have to go through them. What are you looking for? What are they actually looking for? What is going to speak to them immediately? Same thing, technology. What is the algorithms going to pick up? They're going to look at the alignment of words, usage of jargon and words that they are screening on.
Now,
totally, Celeste. Yeah. Sorry, Martina?
No, absolutely. Like in the beginning, we mentioned that there was 68 applicants at the time I copied this advertisement. So that was just LinkedIn, 68. What about all the others? So
quite right.
Yeah. And if it's not a LinkedIn CV, you can kind of put together a CV there with LinkedIn. Yeah. If it's not a LinkedIn CV, if you're doing your own layout, then you also want to be able to catch somebody's eye visually. Because as you were saying, I mean, Celeste mentioned 200, when I saw 68, I know you said, oh, that's a lot. I thought, well, that's not actually such a lot compared to how many you can. Okay. if you have a human looking at the CVs, they can't help but notice the ones that are neat, organized, well laid out, where the font is easy to read. It's a good size. So normally I advise Arial or Calibri. Normally size 11, but don't try and get too intricate there. Just keep it plain, simple, well organized, neat. We've got spell check, we've got Grammarly. So again, those things aren't meant to be important, but some people just find it really important. And so you could again have a biased recruiter who gets to your CV, and if there's spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes, they immediately have a kind of bias. So do look out for those things, even though technically those aren't necessarily the things that would make you good at what you do.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of information. So let's move on maybe to the final part, because there is still some part in this advertisement in particular. So we have here the qualification and educational requirements, which are only 3 points, and they're coming at the end. So would you say that this is something that really matters for this employer?
You're saying because it comes at the end of the job description?
Yes, and it's only 3 points. So they are saying that you should have honors or master's degree in science, that it's preferred. Does it mean that you have to have it? Does it have to be at least master's? How would you see it? If you're a PhD candidate, would you think that it's below your qualifications?
Well, firstly, in terms of how importantly they're rating it, I think what Celeste mentioned earlier around the requirements, where she pointed out the word may, I think, you've got to look out for those same kinds of words here. So here you've got preferred. So advanced degree in science or related field, honors or master's degree in science is preferred. So you want to highlight the first part, the advanced degree in science or related. And so but again, if you don't have what is preferred, you don't want to highlight that. You do want to highlight, though, what they are saying is essential. So they're saying minimum 5 years or equivalent. So if you don't have quite 5 years, you want to maybe flesh out other types of work that you've done alongside your studies that could help you pull together more years of experience. So yeah, it's about trying to look at what you've done holistically in and outside of your studies, in and outside of the workplace, and see how can I pull together evidence for what they're wanting, for what's most important and what's least important. I mean, here it might not, just because it's coming at the end, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not as important, because here they're just following a template of how to fill in their job description. But if they are writing up their own job description in their own template, then you might see a different ordering. But you could look at, for example, under knowledge, skills, and abilities, which ones are they listing towards the top and which ones are they listing towards the bottom? Unless you've got a situation like Celeste says, where they're just copying and pasting information. Yeah. But hopefully it's going to give you an indication of what's most important, because that would be near at the top.
Okay, I see. So required, when something is required, that's something you have to point out. And if it's minimum 5 years, then you can try to wiggle it a bit with your internships and all things that you did in the past. And then preferred, well, yes, that's preferential, I guess. But not necessarily that it's a minimum master's degree.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we move on to knowledge, skills, and abilities, then I guess the biochemistry, if we are scientists, that's quite obvious. And we have the knowledge about the reagents and assays, all sorts of things like that, because we already are doing it physically in the wet lab. That was required by their advertisement. But managing projects, I guess this also can be explained by, I managed my project in master's, during my master's thesis. Would that be applicable?
Yeah. And then yes, you can definitely do that.
And then strong communications, we are presenting in front of our peers and PI, in front of sometimes faculty or on the conferences.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's absolutely, those are your power skills that are kicking in there, Martina, and you definitely need to highlight those, because you've exercised them in your environment.
Yeah, I agree. Good point.
Acknowledge and respect others' diverse perspective. You have to do that, especially if you're doing teamwork on projects and that. Analytical and problem-solving skills, that is what you're learning to do. That is your makeup as a scientist. Time management, you need to do that, because you're meeting deadlines when it comes to submitting your theses and your publications and that. It's all important, but
we have repetition of the communication as well as the teamwork and collaboration. So it's quite repetitive, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah, I think it also depends on how their defining it, which is difficult from a job ad or job profile, because we don't know what behaviors they link to effective written and verbal communication or strong teamwork and collaboration. I mean, effective written communication, for example, that would already be, you'd already have evidence of that if you have a publication, because you wouldn't be able to get the publication if you didn't have effective written communication skills. So normally a recruiter can look for evidence of those skills in instances like that. But I think, like we were saying earlier, and like Celeste highlighted, exactly the same as with the job description. Under knowledge, skills, and abilities, you can pull those technical and power skills together. So you can talk about a situation where you were involved in something that involved automation, instrumentation, manufacturing processes. But in that situation, you were working as part of a team, and you were required to collaborate and communicate remotely or whatever the case may be. And then the impact of that was whatever. So again, you're looking for how you can pull together and combine what they're requiring into the examples that you're selecting to put into your CV. And again, we've got that little voice in the back of our head saying the CV is getting longer. So you've got to really select which ones you want to put in, and not put in everything just because you want to put it in.
I think a good departure point also is to have a look at the job ad, because as I say, the job ad is often a replication of the job description, and often, with respect to our industry, not much effort is put in to putting content or posting content in the form of a job ad through the various job boards and that. So the good departure point is to actually have a look where there's repetition, because I can guarantee you, if you have to go through the knowledge, skills, and abilities, and Martina, if you go to the previous slide and you have a look at the power skills, invariably there's duplication. There is duplication. So you can actually cut this job ad down to a half, if not a quarter.
Yeah, great point.
Yes, here also like the cross-functional relationships and serves as the subject matter. All of those things, I guess, come together, and you can put it actually as a one point.
Yeah, if the employer does use a competency-based approach, then technically when they're looking at your CV, they're not looking just at what you've done before. They're looking for evidence of the competencies that you have that have enabled you to achieve whatever you achieved, or to do those tasks or manage those key areas of responsibility. So technically speaking, your recruiter would then be looking at this slide here, the qualifications, the knowledge, skills, and abilities, because if you have those, doesn't mean if you've done that exact thing before, you probably would be able to do it because it's a transferable skill. But then you also have those recruiters who are maybe differently trained or less trained, and so maybe they wouldn't look as much at that. They would look at, have you done it before? So it's quite difficult because you're almost putting something out into space there, not knowing who or what is screening. And so I think as we made that point in the beginning, the most important thing is to speak the language of the job ad or the job profile. And if you need more information on it, you might find a more detailed version on the company's website. So you can go and look there as well.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wrap up, because it was a lot of information, and I think our viewers probably are overwhelmed with the amount of information. So some take-home points are sifting through information and finding the duplicates so that you can combine it in 1 point, but maybe those were like 5 points in the whole advertisement. finding the keywords that they are looking for, so that you go through the SEOs and other softwares that they might be using.
Yeah.
And yes, align the word choice with the job description. And research company and its values to show it in the CV itself, and sticking to required length, I guess.
Very hard.
Yeah. But I think the key to this, the key to the take-home points here, Martina, is really to sift through the information and distill and take out the duplicates. Because as I say, you can actually cut that, let's say, question paper down to half, if not a quarter, which means that it can mirror your answer paper, which can then be down to a 1 or a 2 pager.
Yeah.
So basically, and also
Great.
an important point I'll just remind about, if you have publications and you had, let's say, 5 publications, you don't have to list them all. You can put the hyperlink, or if required, just put on as requested. You can give the publications for review.
Yeah, so you could mention how many you've done, but you don't have to put all of the detail in for all of them. Yeah.
Correct.
To stick to the length.
No, I think you've summarized it well, Martina.
Yes.
Well done.
And yes, pointing out the achievements. So it doesn't have to be the scientific achievement. If the company is focused on sustainability and you have some achievements in that field, participating in some kind of saving planet, any type of activities, then you can point that out as well, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, ladies, for this lovely conversation. I think our viewers could get plenty of information out of this webinar. I really appreciate your participation and all the knowledge that you shared with us. Thank you.
Only a pleasure.
Glad we could participate with you in this wonderful, innovative creation that you're putting together here, Martina. Really, I know Celeste and I also really value people giving away information that's going to be able to help others. So, really enjoyed being with you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks very much, Martina. I think the solutions and the tools that we've shared today will definitely, build and assist with the gap between the academia and the commercial world. So thanks once again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.